brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of Africa, proud people of the Caribbean, and all oppressed souls of the world. Today I stand before you at a moment that history will never forget. A moment when a small island shook the world, a moment when the chains of slavery cracked, a moment when the palaces of London, the corridors of Washington, and the halls of Brussels trembled with fear. Just 48 hours ago, yes, merely 2 days ago, the Caribbean island of Barbados, a nation of less than 300,000, sent a thunderbolt across the globe. Barbados declared, "We are no longer slaves." And this was not a cry in the wind. This was the heartbeat of a revolution. This was the roar of dignity after 400 years of exploitation. This was the sound of a people reclaiming their destiny. Barbados signed a $2.4 billion economic pact with our African Confederation. And let me be clear, this is not just a trade deal. This is a declaration of war against a system of colonial theft that lasted for centuries. This is a hammer strike on the chains of economic slavery. Let us remember history. In 1627, British colonizers landed in Barbados. They built the most brutal sugar plantation economy the world had seen. For centuries, our brothers and sisters were enslaved, their sweat and blood feeding the wealth of Europe. And when Barbados declared independence in 1966, the chains remained. The banks were still owned in London. The currency was still tied to London. Tourism and trade still fed London. Independence was only a word. Reality was still slavery. But today, my people, today the tables have turned. Today a small island has become a torch for the world. I, Ibrahim Traoré, captain of Burkina Faso, have studied these colonial structures. I have seen how the global financial system strangles entire continents in poverty. I understood that unless Africa and the Caribbean unite, unless we claim our own destiny, the vampire of imperialism will never stop drinking our blood. That is why I built a new vision, a new economic system founded on justice, equality, and sovereignty. In 2023, for the first time, I reached out to the Caribbean nations. I told them, no more selling cheap raw materials to Europe, no more buying expensive finished goods from Europe. Let us trade directly, as equals, nation to nation, people to people. And Barbados was the first to answer this call. Prime Minister Mia Mottley stood tall and said, "We do not need more IMF loans. We do not need more World Bank traps. What we need is partnership, solidarity, and brotherhood." Secret negotiations began in Dubai and Singapore, in Ghana, and finally in March 2024 in Independence Square, Bridgetown, in front of thousands of people, the deal was signed. And it was not just a trade deal, it was a festival of liberation. The African drums beat, the Caribbean music rose, and the people shouted, "No longer will we ask permission from our former masters, we will decide our future ourselves." This pact covers agriculture, industry, energy, education, and tourism. Barbados will receive affordable food directly from Africa. Africa will receive cooperation in energy and tourism. New factories will be built. Thousands of jobs will be created. And above all, a new currency system will be developed to end the slavery of the US dollar and the British pound. And what did the West do? They panicked. London froze accounts. Washington threatened sanctions. France spoke of expelling Barbados from European markets. But listen to me, Barbados did not step back. Burkina Faso will not step back. Africa will not step back. March 15th, 2024, remember this date. It will be remembered as the day when the Caribbean took its first true step toward economic freedom. Inflation fell, jobs were created, debt began to shrink, and most importantly, for the first time, the people felt freedom not just on paper but flowing in their very veins. My brothers and sisters, this is bigger than Barbados. This is bigger than the Caribbean. This is the birth of a new world order, one built not on exploitation, but on equality, respect, and mutual development. And the West is terrified. Because if this model succeeds, then nations across Africa, across the Caribbean, across Asia and Latin America will rise. They will break free. They will burn the chains of economic slavery. I stand before you and declare, the revolution has begun, and nothing, I repeat, nothing, can stop it now. This wave will rise from Africa, sweep through the Caribbean, touch Asia and Latin America, and one day it will reshape the entire globe. The only question is this: Which nations will have the courage to join this caravan? Which nations will dare to strike the final blow against colonialism? Which nations will rise to build a fairer world? So I call out, rise, sons of Africa. Rise, daughters of the Caribbean. Rise, oppressed peoples of the earth. The time has come to seize freedom with your own hands. The time has come to strike the final blow at the face of imperialism. The time has come to show the world that Africa and the Caribbean will never again be slaves. This revolution is alive. It is unstoppable. It is irreversible. And history will write that on this day, a small island dared to challenge an empire, and together with Africa, lit the fire of a new dawn. We will march forward. We will win. We will be free. Just 48 hours ago, history witnessed a tremor that shook the very foundations of colonial power. A small Caribbean island of barely 300,000 people has written its name into the annals of global resistance. Barbados, once a symbol of British plantation cruelty, has now become a torchbearer of freedom. By signing a $2.4 billion economic pact with the African Confederation, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, it has announced to the world that the age of submission is over. This pact is not a routine trade deal. It is a direct assault on 4 centuries of economic slavery. From the day British ships landed on its shores in 1627, Barbados was bound in chains of sugar plantations, brutal exploitation, and financial dependence. Even after the so-called independence of 1966, the island remained trapped. Its banks served London, its currency mirrored London, its tourism and industries enriched London, political flags changed, but economic shackles never broke. What Barbados has done today is to tear apart those invisible chains and declare sovereignty in its truest sense. The symbolism of this moment cannot be overstated. For centuries, the Caribbean was treated as Europe's backyard, a source of cheap labor and raw material, while its people carried the scars of slavery. The announcement in Bridgetown's Independence Square was more than a signing ceremony, it was a celebration of real emancipation. African drums and Caribbean music merged in a single voice, proclaiming, "Never again shall decisions be dictated by foreign masters." The pact covers agriculture, industry, energy, education, and tourism. It establishes new factories, generates thousands of jobs, and creates a new financial system designed to reduce dependence on the US dollar and the British pound. For Barbados, it promises affordable food, sustainable growth, and dignity. For Africa, it promises new markets, new partnerships, and a sense of historic justice. Most of all, it offers a living example that an alternative to Western domination is not only possible, but already unfolding. Western powers reacted with fury. London moved to freeze accounts, Washington threatened sanctions, and Paris whispered of punishment through European markets. But the resolve of Barbados did not weaken. The courage of a small island has humiliated global giants. It has shown that when a nation chooses dignity over fear, even the strongest empire trembles. This breakthrough is not just for Barbados and Burkina Faso. It is a signal flare for the entire global South. It tells Africa, the Caribbean, Asia, and Latin America that the old order can be broken, that sovereignty is not a dream, but a decision. The economic revolution sparked by this pact will inspire nations to unite, to demand justice, and to stand tall against centuries of exploitation. The world will remember March 2024 as the dawn of a new era. A small island stood against empires, and by joining hands with Africa, declared a future built not on chains and debt, but on equality, respect, and true independence. This is the historic breakthrough that begins the rewriting of global history. For 4 long centuries, the Caribbean, Africa, and the global South were shackled by the chains of colonial domination. Britain, France, and their allies carved up lands, enslaved peoples, extracted resources, and left behind nations trapped in cycles of debt and poverty. The so-called independence of many former colonies was nothing more than a cosmetic disguise, a political curtain that hid the economic and cultural control that still persisted. Colonialism never truly ended, it simply changed its uniform, moving from armies and navies to banks, trade policies, and international financial institutions. But today that cycle is breaking. The decision of a small Caribbean nation like Barbados to abandon the shadow of British imperialism is not merely symbolic, it is the tearing apart of those invisible chains that bound entire generations to foreign masters. This act challenges the myth that small nations must remain dependent, that freedom is too expensive, and that sovereignty is unattainable. By standing tall against centuries of oppression, Barbados has set in motion a fire that cannot be contained by the walls of London, Washington, or Brussels. Colonial chains were never just about politics, they were about the economy, the culture, and the psyche of the people. For decades, former colonies were told that they needed the West for survival, that without foreign aid, without IMF loans, without the approval of Europe, they could not move forward. This falsehood was the most poisonous weapon of empire, for it created mental slavery, even long after the physical slavery had ended. But Barbados, by aligning itself with Africa and rejecting the dictates of the West, has proven that self-determination is not a dream, but a living reality. Breaking colonial chains is not a single act, it is the opening of a new era. It means ending dependence on Western markets by building partnerships rooted in equality. It means dismantling the exploitative systems that drain resources from the global South. It means creating financial institutions, trade routes, and political unions that serve the people rather than exploit them. And most of all, it means reclaiming the dignity and pride that empire tried to strip away. The end of colonial chains does not mean isolation, it means true integration, nations of the South uniting with each other, not as vassals to Western power, but as equal partners in a shared destiny. It means building a new world order where sovereignty is respected and justice is not dictated by military might. The torch of freedom now passes from generation to generation, burning brighter than ever. Barbados has lifted it high, and Africa, Asia, and Latin America must carry it forward. Colonial chains were strong, but the will of free people is stronger. And once those chains are broken, they can never again be reforged. The world has long been trapped in a cycle of economic servitude, where small nations were forced to bow before the dictates of colonial masters and global financial institutions. The so-called aid packages of the IMF and World Bank were nothing but shackles disguised as solutions. They drowned nations in debt, stripped them of their natural wealth, and reduced their sovereignty to a mere illusion. For centuries, the global South was told that progress was only possible through dependency on the West. But today, a new vision rises, a vision not built on loans, interest, and conditions, but on dignity, equality, and partnership. This new economic vision is one of solidarity between free nations, especially those who share the scars of colonial history. It rejects the model where the rich grow richer and the poor remain enslaved. Instead, it seeks to build a system where resources are exchanged fairly, technology is shared openly, and development is guided by the needs of people, not the greed of corporations. It is an economy where a farmer in Africa, a worker in the Caribbean, and a student in Latin America all share in the fruits of their labor without being robbed by foreign powers. The pact signed by Barbados and the African Confederation is not just a deal on paper, it is the foundation of this new economic order. For the first time, a nation from the Caribbean has turned away from London and Washington, choosing instead to place its faith in African leadership. This act proves that small nations are not weak when they unite, rather they become stronger than the empires that once ruled them. The new vision is not charity, it is empowerment. It is not dependency, it is sovereignty. Such a vision terrifies the West, because it shows that the age of exploitation is ending. It shows that nations no longer need to beg for survival, they can create their own future by standing together. This economic path is a declaration of independence more powerful than any flag-raising ceremony. It redefines power by putting humanity before profit, justice before exploitation, and freedom before control. The new economic vision is the birth of a fairer world. It is the rise of a system where no child goes hungry because their nation's resources were stolen. It is the dawn of an era where no country is punished for daring to dream beyond the walls of imperialism. Barbados and Africa have shown the way, and now the rest of the oppressed world must follow. This vision is not a dream, it is already alive, already growing, already shaking the foundations of an unjust global order. It is a fire that will spread across continents until every nation stands tall, free from debt, free from domination, and free to decide its own destiny. When Barbados declared its independence from economic subjugation, the powers of the West trembled. London froze bank accounts, Washington threatened sanctions, and Paris whispered of exclusion from European markets. These were not mere bureaucratic reactions, they were the desperate flails of an empire that realized its control was slipping. For centuries, the West had relied on fear, dependency, and manipulation to keep smaller nations under its thumb. But Barbados, by standing boldly with Africa, shattered that illusion, exposing the fragility of so-called Western dominance. This panic is a reflection of history repeating itself in reverse. The same powers that once colonized, enslaved, and looted now find themselves facing a small nation that refuses to comply. The colonial chains may have been invisible in modern times, but they were just as binding. Banks, loans, trade agreements, and currency controls were instruments of coercion. When Barbados rejected these chains, the West realized that its economic grip could no longer ensure obedience. The shockwaves were felt not just in Europe, but across the world, in every capital where power is measured in dollars, influence, and fear. The attempts to intimidate Barbados were met with resilience. No threat, no sanction, no promise of punishment could make it retreat. Every attempt to coerce strengthened its resolve. The people of Barbados, united with Africa under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, demonstrated that courage is more powerful than money, dignity more powerful than sanctions, and unity more powerful than threats. The message was clear: sovereignty cannot be bought, freedom cannot be negotiated, and justice cannot be intimidated. This Western panic is not limited to politics, it is psychological. For centuries, the West controlled the narrative, shaping minds through education, media, and propaganda. They created the belief that survival depended on submission. Today, Barbados' actions have cracked that narrative. The world can see that dependency is optional, that sovereignty is possible, and that the chains of neocolonialism can be broken. The panic also signals a shift in the global balance of power. It is a warning to all nations that the old order is crumbling. The Caribbean, Africa, and the rest of the global South are no longer willing to remain passive. Barbados' courage serves as an example that even the smallest nation, united in purpose and allied with others, can confront the giants of the West and emerge victorious. History will record this moment not as a defeat of Western influence, but as the awakening of a new world. The panic of the West is merely the acknowledgement that a new era has begun, an era where nations reclaim their dignity, rewrite the rules of trade, and assert their sovereignty. Barbados has proven that fear is not the path to compliance. Courage is. Threats do not dictate the future. Determination does. And the world has witnessed in this historic moment the birth of a truly free and independent path for all oppressed nations. The tremors of this panic will echo for decades. Every bank, every market, every political office in the West now knows that the old systems of control are vulnerable. The seeds planted by Barbados, nurtured by Africa, will grow into a forest of freedom, and no amount of Western panic will halt the march of justice, equality, and self-determination. The winds of change are sweeping across continents. What began as a bold act by a small Caribbean nation has ignited a movement that no empire can contain. Barbados, by rejecting the dictates of Britain and embracing partnership with Africa, has shown the world that the chains of oppression can be broken. This is not merely a regional shift, it is the dawn of a global revolution, a reawakening of nations long subdued by colonial greed and financial control. For centuries, empires relied on division, fear, and dependence to dominate the global South. Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, and Asia were kept apart, isolated, and made to compete for scraps, while their wealth flowed into the coffers of the West. But today, a new narrative is emerging, one where solidarity replaces subjugation, where equality replaces exploitation, and where self-determination replaces imposed obedience. The Act of Barbados stands as proof that nations, regardless of size or population, can claim their dignity and unite in purpose. This revolution is not fought with guns or armies alone. It is waged through economics, through strategy, through courage, and through vision. By establishing trade based on equality, rejecting exploitative loans, and creating independent financial systems, Barbados and Africa have demonstrated a template for the global South. This is a revolution that respects culture, honors history, and empowers people. It is a revolution that promises real jobs, fair trade, sustainable development, and the reclamation of wealth long stolen by imperial powers. The implications of this global revolution are enormous. It tells the oppressed nations of the world that dependency is not inevitable. It signals to every small nation that sovereignty can be achieved. It warns the West that their hegemony is no longer unchallenged. Empires built on fear, debt, and coercion are confronted by courage, unity, and justice. The message is clear: the era of submission is over, and the age of self-determined nations has begun. This movement will spread from the Caribbean to Africa, from Africa to Asia, and across Latin America. Borders cannot stop it. Oceans cannot drown it. Sanctions cannot halt it. It is a revolution rooted in the hearts and minds of people who have been denied their rights for generations. It is a movement that will reshape global politics, commerce, and society. The world will witness the rise of a South that is free, empowered, and unyielding. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, leading this charge, has shown that leadership is not measured by size or force, but by vision and determination. His call to unity, dignity, and mutual respect has awakened nations. The Caribbean and Africa, once distant by design, are now linked in purpose, setting a precedent for all oppressed peoples. This revolution is living proof that courage is contagious, and that one bold act can trigger a movement powerful enough to shake the foundations of the world order. The global revolution is here. It is unstoppable. It is inevitable. It is the dawn of a new era, where nations reclaim their destiny, rewrite their economies, and rebuild their futures. Every corner of the oppressed world will feel its force, and no empire, no matter how mighty, can turn back the tide of freedom, justice, and equality.